There's even amphetamine-based psychedelics. The DOX compounds are amphetamine-based. And these are psychedelics that you could potentially microdose, which would give you that creative edge and decrease your appetite at the same time.
Sort of tangent on that, going to psychedelic implementation for performance enhancement in the gym, perhaps. Or
I've done that, yeah.
Yeah. So you're mentioning you've used some interesting training aids before, and fat burners, which I don't know how that would play into psychedelics, but I'm interested to hear your elaboration on.
So microdosing, let's start with fat burners. Microdosing is a fat burner because if you microdose higher, it decreases appetite. So it kind of has
indirectly.
It indirectly has an effect. That's all I meant on that. And I found that the more dopaminergic psychedelics, like the phenethylamine class, lysergamides as well, have some dopamine action. Those, of course, by definition, are going to be better for decreasing appetite because obviously amphetamines decrease appetite and they have effects.
Interesting thing. Sorry to cut you off.
Oh no, go ahead.
I never even considered a PEA analog, for example, as a psychedelic necessarily. I always just consider it in stimulant class. So is that what you're referring to when you say appetite suppression, like typically from stimulatory compounds in general, or from actual, like when I think psychedelic, I think mushroom, psilocybin, LSD, ayahuasca, stuff like that. I don't think PEA, amphetamine, dextroamphetamine, blah, blah, blah.
Right. Well, amphetamines are phenethylamines, right?
Yeah.
I think they have the phenethylamine base. So there's a whole class of psychedelics that are just phenethylamines. So the 2C series are all phenethylamine based. Any of the mescaline analogs are phenethylamine based. There's even amphetamine based psychedelics. The DOX compounds are amphetamine based. And these are psychedelics that you could potentially microdose, which would give you that creative edge and decrease your appetite at the same time.
So they're like a hybrid of stimulatory plus creative enhancing?
Yes.
Ah,
yes. I found on days where I microdose acid, I adhere to my diet model so strictly.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Like it's actually a driving factor because I'm trying to cut.
Yeah.
So a driving factor in me to take the microdose on many occasions is like, I know if I take this microdose, I'm going to eat less.
Circling back to kratom briefly, that's also a reason I used to use it, is it killed my appetite.
Dude, it grazed mine.
Really?
Yeah.
What the fuck?
That's so fucked.
That's definitely individual
I wanted to stop taking it because it made me eat so much.
That's wild.
Yeah.
I know people who like forget to eat when they use it.
I wish I had that effect. It makes me eat like there's no fucking tomorrow.
Interesting.
That's weird, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's all I mean by it affected my appetite. So that would be like mescaline microdosing, 2CB microdosing, any of the LSD analogs, like not LSA because it's a fucking seed and that's hurts your tummy. Those have cyanide in them. That's a whole other story. But yeah, like there's a lot of legal lysergamides. I don't know if you know this.
Yeah, like research chemical stuff?
Yeah, like what are they called? 1P-LSD, 1CP-LSD, ALAD, all of these things you can buy on the ClearNet, and you could easily microdose them, and it would decrease your appetite. They also give you an energy boost. So it has like multiple functions. So it increases creativity. It kind of behaves like a coffee.
Yeah, that sounds up my alley for sure, like a hybrid of stimulatory plus creativity rather than just hyper aggressive in one vector.
And it's all dose dependent too.
Yeah.
So you can microdose anywhere from 5 say acid, because we're on that topic.
Yeah.
5 to about 25, and I've microdosed up to 40. So I've like really pushed it. I've wanted to see like how far until you reach I'm actually on a light acid trip versus this is still in the microdose alley.
Right.
So yeah. Yeah, when it comes to the microdosing though, the key is finding the dose.
Right.
So you might microdose 5 micrograms and like hate it. But then you'll go to 15 and you'll be like, okay, these are the effects I'm after. The effects jump they jump in an exponential way.
Right.
It's not like sometimes taking twice as much is twice as intense. It's more like you take twice as much and other effects come to fruition that you didn't anticipate.
Gotcha. So anyway, speaking of psychedelics in a fat burner context, you mentioned they kill your appetite, and like presumably that's the main mechanism by which they burn fat. There's no other like.
No, they just make it so you don't want to eat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I know some stimulants, they do work by literally just increasing your heart rate, for example.
And
like
your energy expenditure, right?
Yeah.
Because you're like you're moving so much.
Yeah, like there's this one drug called clenbuterol. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
It's a beta-2 agonist, and basically it makes you jittery. Like you actually can visibly, if you hold your hand up, you can see it shaking.
I get that from coffee.
It's worse. Like it's to the point where you can't even write properly almost. Like you're like fucking this.
I've had that from Kratom and coffee together.
Oh, really?
Have you ever had that from?
What it depends. I guess how much coffee, it depends. I've definitely had like overstimulation from basic coffee for sure. But to the degree like Clen is next level where you could be focusing on keeping your hand steady and it's like
it's like intensely moving, hey?
it's probably like closer to this, but it's like it's very like what's wrong with you kind of thing.
Right.
So that stuff, it literally works by increasing energy expenditure through like stimulating your heart to just beat faster. So I don't know.
Doesn't sound healthy, man.
No, it's terrible. It's like the worst thing for your heart ever. Arguably one of the most unhealthy bodybuilding drugs that there exists. The psychedelics pre-workout. In general, most people pre-workout, they use things like caffeine. Interestingly enough, PEAs and PEA analogs as well. Like
which ones?
In one of my pre-workouts, I have N-phenethyl dimethylamine citrate, which is
No clue.
It's a pretty smooth, not too aggressive compound that's quite complementary to caffeine. And in general, like I couple that with things like, choline donors, acetylcholinesterase inhibitors, stuff like that help. Like acetylcholine, obviously a major component of actually like facilitating muscular contraction, so you can get instant strength gains if you use things like alpha GPC.
I didn't know that.
Oh. Well, that kind of stuff is typically what people leverage in a pre-workout context, but I know some people, they do use things like kratom, or I don't know, I guess you have experience with stuff I wouldn't have even thought of potentially.
Yeah, just the microdosing, really.
Right. So that is like, what do you get out of that that's above and beyond like a hyper aggressive stimulant, though? If you're having creativity while you're bench pressing, isn't that?
Well, you're not going to have creativity when you're bench pressing.
I know that's probably a stupid question, but I have no fucking.
But the music you're listening to will sound better.
Oh, right.
So it can make that more enticing.
Have you ever had the effect from Phenibut where music sounds better?
No, I've only tried it maybe 10 to 15 times.
I always heard that about it, but I never got it myself.
I never liked Phenibut or Phenibut.
It's kind of a dirty drug.
Yeah, it made me feel just slow, I guess.
Yeah, it has a lot of dependence potential too in terms of.
But when it comes to the using psychedelics in low doses to boost performance, another thing that I've noticed is if I were to say go for a jog in particular, when the LSD microdose or the LSD analog microdose was in full swing, like as the effects first come on, they're usually the most intense, and then they slowly level down. It allows me to just like, I feel like I can run forever. Like I don't know how to explain it other than I don't feel winded. Like I don't know how that effect happens. I can't really extrapolate anything from this except I don't get tired and I can just keep fucking running. So it's really cool in the cardio aspect.
I wonder if those are, I actually don't even know off the top of my head if those are banned in sports.
That'd be hilarious if they're not.
Because that's definitely something that can be, I've definitely talked about that before, but I haven't specifically focused on actual which compounds are not on the banned substance list, but that definitely would be, even reducing your pain threshold, for example, in like combat sports or something. Like I imagine that has
Isn't
huge.
shrooms being studied for that?
I don't know, maybe. I
could be totally off base, but I think they're currently studying, some university is studying psilocybin mushrooms specifically for combat sports. And I have heard Mike Tyson talk about boxing on mushrooms. He did a podcast. He said he boxed on mushrooms and he didn't feel the punches. And that's what I also wanted to touch on this. When I take the microdose and I work out, I feel the same thing with the weights. It feels like I'm not feeling the pain as much. So it's easier to push.
Yeah.
But you also get that from kratom, right?
Yeah. And
Kratom's
obviously the kind of like side disclaimer on that is don't go past pain threshold where you injure yourself by accident on something like kratom.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think the pain reduction is as intense on microdosing as with kratom.
Yeah.
But it's more it's different. It's hard to describe, but it's different. So yeah, it's a myriad of benefits. Like can run longer, I can push longer, and you got to look at the stoned ape theory. I don't know if you know it, by Terence McKenna, who strongly was a proponent that humans evolved alongside psilocybin mushrooms because he said early humans who saw the mushroom and ate it would be better at basic survival acts like hunting because it improves your visual acuity and it allows you to run, for longer. You have better endurance on it. So he thinks that we actually evolved through through natural selection. The humans who ate the mushrooms were the ones who reproduced. So that's why he also believed that the mushrooms have such an impactful effect on us, because we've actually evolved to have the receptors for these, the neurotransmitter, what am I looking for? The cells have receptors for these specific neurotransmitters that are present in the mushrooms, like psilocybin or psilocin binds to the 5-HT2A serotonin receptor. And if you know anything about just basic, well, you know tons about pharmacology. Yeah. So like neurochemically speaking, you could say if you're happier, for instance, you're likely to continue being happier because your cells reproduce with more receptors for whatever dopamine. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So the humans who took these psilocybin mushrooms would have their cells reproduce with more receptor sites for psilocybin, so it would have more of a beneficial effect. And now that's why the drugs are so profound in their effects on us. So yeah, if you follow his theory, then it makes perfect sense why they are beneficial in a physical exertion context.
No, that's good to note, especially because that's I'm sure that's a conversation that'll probably come up when I do Rogan. He's big on psychedelics, and as well, I'm talking literally about performance enhancement. So the hybrid of the two, especially if some of these aren't prohibited on the banned substance list, like, that's fucking huge.
And it's weird because there's a dose response curve where it goes like, so I've tried, this sounds awful, but I've tried working out on pretty high doses.
Yeah.
And it's like there's a sweet spot. And then if you obviously go past that sweet spot, your performance is decreased.
Right.
Like so you can't like say take 100 micrograms would probably be too much. So I've found up to about 40 or 50 micrograms. I'm a small dude. I'm like 5'4". So for me, I weigh 145. I'm pretty light. So that I don't know if it is based on weight, but for me, once I go past 40 micrograms, it has a negative impact. And it's almost to the degree where it's like I'm having an actual trip and I'm like, why the fuck would I want to work out? Like, I don't want to work out. I want to listen to some music. Screw this. But I've found once you reach the peak effects, like at 40 micrograms, that is high, first of all, to most people. Most people wouldn't want to microdose more than 25 at the max end. So I've really pushed it. But at that point, it's like the effects are really strong. Right. Like I really can keep going. Like it's cool. It almost feels like it's a super physiological
exactly
experience.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
I definitely.
So I don't have much more to add on that.
I need to look into that further because I hadn't even really considered that, to be honest, above and beyond basic, like marijuana, for example, was banned for a while, sort of for the same.
How the fuck does that help?
Yeah, sort of for the same reason of reducing pain threshold was the thought process, but it's since been revoked in most sports, but some of them not so much. Your fitness journey, by the way, like it's kind of interesting how I was honestly shocked to see you even commenting on my channel. Like I guess we do have overlap with drugs, but in terms of like have you become more interested in it recently in terms of just general fitness and like?
Yeah, I stopped giving a fuck and now I care. So it's funny. We're talking about these experiences with Connor Murphy, people like where it takes them to the point where they don't give a shit about anything.
And you're like getting up there.
I'm getting up there.
Yeah, because I've noticed you've been posting like progress photos on your Instagram and stuff, and I'm like, so like obviously you do care to some extent about your progression and whatnot.
Well, I went from not giving a shit to caring, so it's having an opposite effect on me.
Okay, that just goes to show that you can not, it's not like it's always downwards in the escalation of.
So this is hard to explain. So what happened with me was